You're listening to Melissa and Lori Love Literacy. Today we'll be talking to internationally acclaimed author, researcher, and educational consultant, Richard Gentry. As part of our Dyslexia Awareness Month series, Dr. Gentry will share with us his personal story of overcoming dyslexia, how dyslexia affects people, and how teachers can help students with dyslexia in the classroom. Welcome, teacher friend. I'm Lori.
And I'm Melissa.
We are two literacy educators in Baltimore. We want the best for all kids, and we know you do too.
Our district recently adopted a new literacy curriculum, which meant a lot of change for everyone. Lori and I can't wait to keep learning about literacy with you today.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Melissa and Lori Love Literacy podcast. Today, we cannot wait to talk to our guest because we are going to dig in with a dyslexia expert. Most importantly, though, we're going to discuss practical ways educators can help students with dyslexia.
Yeah, so we have a return guest. Dr. Richard Gentry is back with us again. So super excited. And if you haven't listened to his last one with us, you definitely should, but we'll tell you a little bit about him. He is an internationally acclaimed author, researcher, and educational consultant. He's a former university professor, university reading center director, and of course, classroom teacher. He's the author of 17 books and the author of Zaner Blizzer's new integrated word study program, Spelling Connections, a word study approach. And one of our favorite books, his latest book is Brain Words, How the Science of Reading Informs Teaching, which we talked a bit about on our last podcast. And you can get it on Amazon if you don't already have it. But yeah, we loved talking to him about that book. So we're excited to talk to him about a new topic today, which is dyslexia.
Yeah, Richard, welcome to the podcast.
Oh, well, thank you, Melissa and Lori. I'm just delighted to be here. What a wonderful treat.
Yeah, well, this is going to be so much fun because we're going to start this podcast off in a way that we have never started a podcast before, which is that you are going to give us a little survey, which I think could be called a self-test to see what we already know about dyslexia, right?
Exactly. It's 5 important questions and answers about dyslexia. And I like to call it a self-test. Did you know that we know from cognitive psychology that self-testing is one of the best ways for us and for children, for everybody to learn. So if we want to learn about dyslexia, let's find out what we already know, facts according to science, and see how that jives with what the science says. So, are you ready? Question number 1. How many kids in your school are dyslexic? I'm going to give you some choices. A, 1 in 5, or B, 2 in 100. What do you think is the best answer? I'm going to come back in a few moments and go through all of these. So you're self-testing, so you don't have to share.
Okay, I'm going to write it down, to be honest. Write it down.
Okay. Very good. Are you ready for question number 2? Facts according to science.
We're ready.
Number 2, good. Does dyslexia run in families? What's your notion about that? Are you ready? Question number 3.
Yes, Melissa is looking perplexed, but...
Uh-oh.
I have a lot of thoughts about it.
Yeah.
You're still thinking on that
It's
one.
all right. You can keep going. We're all right. We'll think and write.
Very good. Question number 3. Are more boys dyslexic than girls?
Ooh. Okay.
That's a little bit of a tough one. Question number 4. Which statement is true? A, many dyslexics end up in prison. B, many dyslexics are successful in life. See, I told you this would be fun.
Fun and difficult.
Uh-huh. And question number 5, can dyslexia be cured? What would be your notion on that? So before we get into the answers, I thought we should first of all think about what dyslexia is. And I wanted to share with you the part of the definition from the International Dyslexia Association. And it goes like this: dyslexia is a specific learning disability that is neurological or neurobiological in origin. And it's interesting, you might not know this, but dyslexia happens to be the number 1 reading disability. It's characterized by difficulties with accurate and or fluent word recognition, and often by poor spelling and decoding abilities. And their secondary consequences, which may include problems in reading comprehension and reduced reading experience that can impede growth of vocabulary and background knowledge. So it's really quite complex. It generally is most recognizable, I would say, in children who have trouble learning to read and learning to spell. Kind of nice way to start out, I think, with a dyslexia definition. Does that kind of fit with what you had in mind in terms of what you think that dyslexia is, your understanding of what it might be?
Yeah, I think so. But I mean, I love having the very specific, like hearing specifically what it is, not just having trouble reading, but very specifically what's going on.
And we're definitely going to get into that in our podcast today.
Yeah.
So let's go back to those questions. Right. Number 1, how common is dyslexia? How many kids in your school are dyslexic? And I gave you 2 options. 1 in 5 was letter A, or 2 in 100. So here you go. The answer is, well, truthfully, nobody knows.
That was a trick question.
I'm famous for trick questions.
I have a feeling a few of them are trick questions.
I know. I agree, Melissa. Definitely number 4 and maybe 5. I don't know.
Recent studies suggest that 1 in 5 people have neurologically based processing difficulty for learning to read, and often brain scientists say it's about 10%. But part of the difficulty is determining the incidence of dyslexia is that it manifests itself in a continuum. So that some cases are very, very mild, some cases are medium, and some cases can be very, very severe. So one thing for us to keep in mind is that it's likely that all teachers, no matter what their subject area or their grade level, it's likely that all teachers work with students who are in fact dyslexic in their classrooms. And we're going to get to some specific ideas of how teachers should work with these kids. Question number 2, are you ready?
Ready.
Does dyslexia run in families?
I said yes.
Very good. You want to share your answer, Melissa?
I wanted to say no. That was my gut instinct. Like, no, it doesn't. But then I was thinking about a lot of the parents we've had on the podcast that talked about their children with dyslexia. And they often talked about, brothers and sisters, aunts and uncles, their mom and dad, they often talk about other people in the family. And I was like, oh, I bet it is. Yes.
Well, if you would have ended up exactly right. The answer is yes. And it's genetic in origin. It's biologically and neurologically based. So familial occurrence is not surprising. And I'm glad you mentioned the brothers and sisters and parents, because if you are dyslexic, it's likely that half of your brothers and sisters are too.
Really?
Isn't that amazing?
Wow.
Yeah.
Is that why in the definition it's a specific learning disability, neurobiological in origin? Is that why that's
Yes.
specific in that definition?
Yes.
That's really interesting.
Furthermore, if you are dyslexic, it's about a 50% chance that one of your parents is dyslexic. Wow. But often it does skip a generation.
Oh, wow.
So does it run in families? Absolutely. But those are some facts according to science that are quite interesting and I think important for teachers to recognize.
Yeah.
Because if you have kids who you suspect have symptoms of dyslexia, one of the major things you want to do is talk with the family members and find out if this is something that they're aware of that has occurred in their family. So here we go. Question number 3. Are boys more likely to have dyslexia than girls? Anybody want to
This one I'm
hazard a
not totally
guess?
sure on, but I said yes.
Okay.
I thought they might be more likely to be diagnosed because of other factors that we sometimes pair with dyslexia.
I was going to say, Lori, I had that same thought, but then I also thought they might be less likely to be diagnosed because
They would get diagnosed with the other things,
or just like, oh, that's just a behavior issue or things like that.
Oh, excellent,
Yeah.
excellent. Well, the answer is yes.
Oh, all right.
And, for science is interesting because, science continues to bring in new information. Recent studies debunk a popular myth that the numbers are equal. About 10 years ago, I think folks were thinking, according to science, that the numbers were equal, but the latest science does report that dyslexia is more common in boys.
Do you know a reason for that?
Say it
Do
again.
you know the reasoning or like why that happens? Like why is it more common in boys?
I can't.
If you don't know, it's okay. No pressure.
Yeah. I can't explain why.
That's okay. I was just curious.
It's very, very complex, but that's a great question. That's a good research question.
I'll look it
maybe
up.
some researchers are going to be listening in, and they're going to do the research and find out why. And let's see. What about that prison question? Question number 4. Which statement is true? Letter A, many dyslexics end up in prison, or B, many dyslexics are successful in life.
I feel like
Hold on. I think we should say our answer at the same time, Melissa. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Both.
Oh, my goodness. Well, you know what? You're exactly right.
See, you tried to trick us again.
I did.
2 things
I
can
did.
be true. That's
Two
Lori's
things
mantra.
can be true. It's my mantra.
Yeah. Well, absolutely. And you're way too clever for me. So, but that's great. Yes. Question number 5: Can dyslexia be cured?
So I said not cured. Like I don't think that there's like a, you take a magic pill and all of a sudden everything's fine, but I feel like there's probably ways to learn how to overcome some of the struggles that come along with it.
Agree. I feel like it's not a quote disease that leaves your body, right? Like
Right. Like everything's gone.
yeah, it's not it's not ever gone. Genetically it's always there, but I do think we can rewire the brain so that people with dyslexia can read effectively and efficiently and learn and spell and decode and be functioning literacy adults and students.
Absolutely. What a great response from both of you. The answer, can it be cured, is definitely no. It's genetic. However, both genetic and environmental factors play a role. And one of the reasons that teachers really need to understand dyslexia is because early intervention is a major goal. And the earlier we find that kids are dealing with learning disability like dyslexia and intervene, the more likely we are able to get kids on the right track and help kids overcome dyslexia. So just for fun, are you ready for this? I threw in a bonus question, number 6.
Oh my gosh, okay.
Number 6, bonus question. Do people with dyslexia see words backwards? Ooh. What do you think about that one?
I don't think so. I think that's a myth.
Oh, I was going to say yes.
Oh, well, this is
I'm not sure, though, now that you said no. I just imagine our listeners right now, Richard, just taking this, saying it out loud. I'm taking this right along with us. I was going to say yes.
I hope so. That was the intent. That's the intent. And, you're doing a great job because you're absolutely correct. The answer is probably not, but the science on this issue is kind of muddled.
Okay.
Most recent studies associate dyslexia's causal factors with early difficulties in letter sound processing. We hear a lot about phonological processing deficits, and often with something called RAN, or automatic rapid naming. While dyslexic children don't see words backwards, after grade 2, it may be a red flag if they tend to write words backwards.
So that's why I said that, because I was thinking about the writing, and then I was thinking, well, maybe if they're writing it backwards, maybe then they're reading it in their brain backwards, because I think writing is the way that they are, thinking in their. It's an expression of what's going on inside their brain. That's what made me say that, but I'm so glad that you debunked that for me.
Absolutely. Fun.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering if we should move along. Why don't we think about some of the major symptoms of dyslexia?
This is so helpful, especially because I feel like we did not get this in our teaching prep program. So I'm really excited to have this conversation with an expert.
Well, I am an expert on dyslexia, and I can say that because I'm dyslexic.
Which I think a lot of people would be surprised about, because, you are like the spelling guy.
Exactly. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about my story. It's very uncanny. Some teachers call me the guru of spelling, but it's been a long journey. And one of the reasons that I've been so focused all my career on the importance of spelling for reading is because of my own personal experience. Mm-hmm. And I think that happens a lot with folks who have disabilities. It's important to know the classic symptoms. But as teachers and educators, we need to recognize that what we're talking about are symptoms that we see and not a diagnosis. Because dyslexia is neurological, we would need to refer to a medical specialist or trained psychologist for an official diagnosis. Educators really are not equipped to diagnose neurological processing disorders. So, but we can certainly, it's important that we know the classic warning signs, because we're probably some of the best folks to see early on these signs with kids in the classroom. So I thought that we would look at 3 different categories. First of all, classic warning signs for school-age children. No, classic warning signs rather in early childhood. And these include things like speech delay, language isn't occurring as it should. Receptive language often is fine. That is, kids can understand language, but expressive language is sometimes delayed. It's difficult for them to express themselves in language. Now, keep in mind that no 2 dyslexics are alike, and no kid is going to have all of these symptoms But if we see a pattern, or if you are a teacher and you're thinking about a particular kid, think about these symptoms that I'm going to share with you. And if you see a pattern of them lining up together, that might be a red flag.
Richard, that's what I keep thinking about is, like you said earlier, it's a continuum. So I was thinking if I was a teacher and I was thinking about the signs that you're sharing, I would be thinking about that continuum idea, that it's not all going to line up perfectly with every single student every single time, that we're people and the human element makes it a continuum. So I think that's really important to keep in mind. Thank you for bringing that up.
Very good. Yeah, absolutely. Another warning sign is saying sounds in the wrong sequence, odd pronunciations. I don't know if you have heard me, kind of articulate a couple of words already, because I certainly continue to do that. But what we're talking about are odd pronunciations like paschetti for spaghetti, or aminal for animal. A word that I often myself still have difficulty with is aluminum. And what I'll do is I'll switch the beginning sounds of the last two syllables. And you often, or I, for a lot of my life, I pronounced that word as alu-ni-mum. Instead of my-num, I said ni-mum. So another sign, word retrieval problems, difficulty finding the word that they want to use. You might hear kids say, "Oh, that thingy," just can't bring that word out. Trouble with rhyming words, trouble with phonemic awareness, trouble with invented spelling. And some of these signals can begin as early as preschool and kindergarten, the first part of kindergarten. And certainly a history, as we've mentioned, of family members with reading problems. So what about classic warning signs for school-age children? Some of these, it probably never occurred to you that they may be symptoms of dyslexia, but one of the things is difficulty memorizing arbitrary sequences, things like days of the week or months of the year.
That's helpful.
Spelling.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was going to say, we just had a parent on that was talking about that, right? That they could say the letters in order, they could say the days of the week in order, but if you took it out of the sequence, it was like they had no idea.
Yeah. And, spelling is so important, because spelling, in fact, is kind of like a...
You're sequencing the letters.
Yeah. And it's a gift to see what's going on in the mind of the child. I mean, we hear so much about decoding and phonics, but spelling is really a deeper level of phonics, and it's easier to read a word than it is to spell a word. And so what I was just trying to say, I couldn't retrieve that word. Dyslexia is spelling is kind of a window into the mind, and it helps us know how, what the child knows about language and literacy and what we need to teach. One of the things, I blog for Psychology Today and have for a number of years, and I often hear from parents, and they send me samples of their children's writing, and I've done this from parents, all over the world, really. But one of the interesting things is that often I'll have fourth graders, and sometimes they're very excellent readers, but their writing and spelling is really way behind their readers. And I even see sometimes a classic warning sign: children have difficulty spelling their own name. I can think of one case study that, and I do all this pro bono, but one case study with parents that I've followed for quite a number of years now, and their fourth grade son was reading above grade level. Brilliant kid. His writing was amazing, but his spelling was atrocious. And they'd send me in samples, and on one of 8 samples, he had misspelled his name on one of those. But other things like learning their phone number, learning names of the letters, learning sounds of the letters, multiplication tables. Sometimes kids who have dyslexia have a really difficult time. Sometimes they're gifted in math. So again, these are sometimes very surprising, but co-occurring symptoms. How to tie their shoe. Some kids 7 or 8 or later. Another symptom, issues with dominance, right-handed or left-handed. Normally, kids, you could tell if they're right-handed or left-handed around 4 years of age. With dyslexic kids, it can be 7, 8, or 9 years of age. But it's interesting. Can you think of sometimes dyslexic kids have mixed dominance? And can you think of a way that might be an asset? They can do this, they can do something just as easily left-handed as they can right-handed.
I would love to do that. Definitely in sports,
That's
though.
a huge
Exactly.
I know,
sports,
it's like
and being an architect or
an artist,
or artist, it can kind of be a gift. Difficulty with written expression, slow reading rate is one of the ones that often dyslexic kids deal with. Poor handwriting skills, poor test-taking skills, trouble spelling, and this is an interesting difficulty reading musical notes from a score. So it's really complex, and there's so much to that makes it interesting. But it's so important that we recognize some of these, I think. And what about class?
Oh,
yes.
Sorry, I'm just wondering. I'm blown away by some of these. I know, like for example, tying your shoes. Not being able to remember your phone number or the alphabet. Those are things that I'm like, oh, really? Okay, all right. I need to put these in my long-term memory and refer to your blog posts in the future, because they're definitely not anything that I would have thought of, off the cuff, when we think about dyslexia and thinking about symptoms or ways that we can access, if a child is dyslexic or not, or just like red flags, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And these aren't all mine. I didn't come up with all these. I wish I could claim that. But one of the folks who has been very important in helping understand this is Susan Barton. And she does have a website. And, I totally recommend that website.
Okay.
But let's look at classic warning signs for young and older adults. One of the symptoms is struggling with academics in school, of course. But interestingly, some kids who are dyslexic are really high achievers in school, and they may compensate by working harder, grit and determination. And, those aren't bad traits to have at all. Lifelong struggling with spelling for young and older adults, a slow reading rate, poor test-taking skills, difficulty with written expression sometimes, fear of reading out loud. If you're a fourth grader and you're dyslexic, you might really feel embarrassed, and you might really feel stupid, and you are terrified when the teacher calls on you to
Richard,
read out loud.
I was in like the 99th percentile of readers, and I was terrified to read out loud. So I can only imagine if I was a struggling reader in any way, what that would feel like.
Exactly. And that's, we really, if we recognize these symptoms, we can have more empathy and be more helpful for these kids. Difficulty with foreign languages. I'll tell you a little bit about that in terms of my personal experience. Phonological awareness, trouble, but not only phonological awareness, but trouble with background noise. And, that can be very important in a classroom and we're going to think of some ways to help out with that. Trouble with left and right, bad with driving directions, and bad sense of directionality. For example, this is one of my pet peeves. I'm in a hotel or at a conference center or in a school, and I get off an elevator in the hotel, and I can never remember which way to go, to get back to my room, left or right, or in a conference center. It's really it can really be disconcerting.
I'm going to make up a song for you. That's what I do for myself when I travel. I make up a little song. Remember. We'll talk offline. I'll sing to you offline.
Oh, you sure you don't want to hear that? I think everybody would love it.
Well, okay, so here's what I do. I take a nursery rhyme or a familiar tune, and then I'll put in where, like, go left, go right, or like I'll use the landmarks in the hotel or the space to remind myself, like, up the elevator, floor 3. And then, but like sing it to the tune of like Twinkle, Twinkle or something, just in my head, not out loud. But it's really helpful. And it helps my daughter too, because her memory is like mine.
I think that's brilliant. I'm going to use that myself.
All right.
Yeah, I love it. Well, I wondered if you wanted to hear a little about my personal story. I've claimed to be an expert on dyslexia. Okay. Well, it kind of starts out like this. When I was a sophomore in college at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, it was the end of the semester, and I was in this Shakespeare course, and we had been required to read all of Shakespeare's plays. And at the end of the story, I'll tell you how I managed to do that, but it was quite a challenge for me because I have such a slow reading rate. But the professor, there was a big section, 79 kids in the section. He gave out 78 exams and said, Mr. Gentry, I want to see you in my office. Yeah, it sent ice splints up my spine. I felt I had really worked hard, and I felt like I did very well on that test. And I had never, in 13 years of school, never cheated on the test. So I knew that wasn't the issue. And so I'm very uncomfortable when I sit down in this hard oak chair next to his desk, and he pulls out my exam and he says, Mr. Gentry, you are one of 7 students, only 7, who made an A in this course. He said, the problem, and he didn't know me from beans out of that section.
Right.
The problem, he says, is your spelling. And he showed me example after example after example of a misspelled word that would have embarrassed a 5th grader that I'd written in class. And at the end of that, he said, Mr. Gentry, anyone who is smart as you are who spells like this is just plain lazy.
Oh my gosh.
Oh, no.
Yeah. That is not what I thought you were going to say.
Well, I knew I wasn't a lazy speller because I have a personal record of 252 100s on the Friday spelling test. My grandmother drilled, and every Thursday night, and I would memorize the words on the list and make 100 on Friday. And
That is not lazy. Not lazy at all.
It's not lazy. The problem was that, 3 weeks later, I didn't have those spellings in long-term memory.
Right.
I couldn't see those spellings in the dictionary in my mind. When I was in 7th grade, I was in a little rural school in Tobacco Road, North Carolina. And when I was in 7th grade, there was a county spelling bee. And they gave it a list of something like 1,800 words, and I memorized those words. I beat the 8th graders in my school, went to the county bee, and came in 3rd place.
Wow.
And it came out in the local Courier Times. The pictures of the 3 winners of the county spelling bee. And by the time that came out, my grandmother laughed because she knew by the time it came out, I could only spell about a third of the words on.
Yeah, you had forgotten.
Yeah.
It's not
they
stored.
weren't in. Exactly. They weren't in long-term memory.
Can I make a quick connection to sight words here?
Yeah.
When we ask students to memorize sight words, which we know is not the best way to teach.
Right.
That
Correct.
is very equivalent to me to memorizing spelling words, like spelling
Absolutely.
lists. There's so many similarities there that just strike me, especially as you're talking about this right now and you're being very honest and saying, I didn't remember. And I will be very honest too and say I had Friday spelling tests. I don't remember, how to spell those words. Although I did map the words to my long-term memory because I mapped the sounds to the letters and had that. That was different.
And that's the secret with a science of reading, research-based modern spelling book. Instead of just assigning the words and have parents drive parents crazy on Thursday night because they're calling out the words, you have to go through a process of using the words through the week to get those in a number of different evidence-based ways to get those words into long-term memory. And if kids are dyslexic, they have, one of the things we understand about the architecture of the reading brain with many dyslexics, is they have difficulty having a representation of spelling in their brain, that they can't see the spelling in their mind. You're not aware that you have this metaphorical dictionary in your brain, and that if you're an excellent reader, you're like an excellent speller, that you use that spelling for reading and then connect to your spoken language, which leads to comprehension. If you've heard of the famous reading rope and the simple view of reading, this all fits in well with that very powerful theory of reading.
Yeah. Richard, I know I don't want to take you off on a left turn at all, but I'm just wondering really quickly if you might want to tell us a bit about the spelling connections, the word study approach. Is that integrated approach that you just talked about?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, first of all, let me say that we now know that spelling is a very, very powerful word study. And what I've done, over 40 years as a spokesperson for spelling and developing spelling curriculum for schools, having recognized early on that it's essential and connected with reading and reading comprehension, the notion that, and Louisa Moats is very big on spelling books, and the notion that kids need about 20 minutes a day of integrated word study for spelling. And so that's what I did with the Spelling Connections program. I tried to, stay up on the research and tried to make it easy for teachers. Teachers are struggling right now to teach spelling. They're going to the internet, and there's no consistency. They know that most teachers understand that spelling is important, but they don't have resources. In too many schools, they don't have good resources because frankly, with whole language and balanced literacy, spelling was kind of thrown out of the curriculum. We were told in that theory that we didn't need to teach spelling, and that spelling books were bad, essentially. They were a waste of time. Spend money on children's literature. Of course, spend money on children's literature, but you got to teach automatic word recognition, and spelling is a key part of that. And so what I've tried to do in my work with spelling books is help teachers save time instead of, I call it integrating phonological awareness, integrating vocabulary learning, integrating sight word recognition by not by guessing, but by looking at the letters. The whole goal is to get them into long-term memory in that, dictionary in the brain. So thank you for allowing me to mention that. But it seems that spelling continues to get short shrift, but there are modern spelling curricula out there that are affordable, doable, and I just think teachers need to be on the forefront in bringing those materials into the classroom. It's not very congenial for teachers to try to break all of those integrated things like grammar and phonological awareness and sight word recognition and vocabulary work into separate subjects. It's so much more powerful if they're integrated into, and that's what we do. That's what we do in a modern science reading spelling book. We integrate those.
Richard, I'm so curious about, your story with that professor, and thinking about now today you're an author of, what would he say, it's 17 books and and a curriculum and blog posts all the time. How does dyslexia still play a part in your life today, even though, I'm sure you've worked very hard to learn as much as you can about how to overcome it?
Absolutely. Well, let me mention some of those classic warning signs and that we just talked about, and tell you how they affected me. We said one of them was struggling with academics in school. I was always an A student. My mom taught me to read in first grade, and I, was very driven. But I think there's no question in my mind, I compensated simply by working harder. And I was a top-notch student all the way through college and graduate school. But a lot of it was resilience and grit and working hard. For example, when I was in that Shakespeare course, I went to the library and I checked out Shakespeare's plays on tape. And I read all of the plays. But what happened is when I listened to the plays on tape, and there were sound effects like when an army came marching in, I could hear the trumpets, and so I could visualize and comprehend what was going on. I do have I've had lifelong struggles with spelling. I continue to. I can't send anything out public without having it checked by an editor. And, spell check sometimes is stupid and will make, I've always, I love editors. I've always depended on editors. I continue to have a very slow reading rate. And as someone who is an academic, that's certainly challenging. I simply can't read as many books or as fast as a lot of other people can. I don't have poor test-taking skills. I have really excellent test-taking skills, but the problem is the timing. Yeah. If tests are timed, then I'm likely not to to finish, I don't have difficulty with written expression. In fact, I love writing, and it's kind of one of my blessings, I think. I don't have fear of reading out loud, but when if you see me at a conference, you'll see that I have a lot of prep work. I use a PowerPoint, and I use those slides to help me, and I can read out loud very well. Difficulty with foreign languages. I had a very interesting experience with that, in the sense that all A student in high school, we were required to do French. I didn't so much struggle with French, but it didn't come easily. And I'd made A's in French in 2 years of high school. And then I went to college, and the only C I ever made in my life was in French in college. And I failed the midterm. And I had to really struggle to bring that up to a C. And then when I got to graduate school at the University of Virginia, I wanted to be in the PhD program, and they required, at that time, they're very forward-thinking there, they required 2 foreign languages. And, I knew that there's just no way. So what they did, they accommodated for, even back then, this is like, quite a few decades ago, they allowed me to substitute statistics for one of the languages, and I hired a French-speaking tutor, and just worked for 6 weeks with that tutor, just enough to pass the French test that was required. So foreign languages, and it makes sense because they have a different orthographic or spelling system, a different sound system for matching letters to sounds. So it's understandable. The best way for someone who struggles is learning disabled like I was, dyslexic. The best way is to go immerse oneself in the language. Just go, I wish I could go live in France.
Don't we all?
Yeah.
I think you're speaking to that integrated approach.
Exactly. And then that bad sense of directionality. Oh my goodness. I live on the corner. I live on a Government Street, on the corner of Government and West. Okay. The problem is I'm in this area where West Street is in a little area called Claire, and it's really east. West Street.
Oh, geez.
It sounds like Washington, D.C. to me. East West Street.
Exactly. Still, sometimes if I'm get to the end of West Street, I have to stop and think. If I'm going downtown, I need to turn right. If I'm going out to the mall or the airport, I need to turn left. And as I mentioned earlier, I'm one of those guys who always gets lost. I'm going to use that little song trick.
Use the song trick
that you gave us. Yeah.
Or even a little mnemonic device. I love those too. Little mnemonics.
Oh, absolutely. But it's not unusual for some people who are dyslexic like myself to become experts in their area of disability. And I do attribute dyslexia to helping me become a leading authority on spelling and dyslexia, and a 40-plus year as a researcher and supporter of spelling books. And without dyslexia, I probably wouldn't have co-authored Brain Words, the Brain Words book with a very accomplished Canadian reading scientist, Jean Ouellette. And I probably would never have had a blog, an education blog on psychology today. So, I just feel really blessed in my career and as a person. And I just hope one of my missions in life is to help. I think the most important thing we teach in school is teaching kids to read. it impacts everything else in their life, in their career, and opens so many doors. And right now, particularly children who are in vulnerable populations, often children who are poor, children of color, who's brown kids and African American kids who are in schools where they are a higher percentage of failing schools. I just think in children with learning disabilities, my mission in life is to teach those kids to read. And I think there's really no better blessing than to think of it like that.
Well, I love that. I'm actually wondering if we could give teachers some practical advice or tips if they have students in front of them who either have been diagnosed with dyslexia or maybe are presenting with some of these, I don't know if we should say symptoms or signals of dyslexia, and how they can help them.
I think that's so important. Let's look first just in a general overview. How can schools help children with dyslexia? Mm-hmm. One of the things that comes to mind, I've already mentioned it, intervene early, teach phonics linked to phonemic awareness, teach spelling explicitly. Spelling and brain words ignite the reading brain. Teach writing, begin teaching handwriting in preschool and kindergarten, encouraging kids to use invented spelling. One of the things I would say is teach handwriting, including manuscript for beginners and cursive beginning in second grade. Handwriting is a proven language learning skill.
I was going to say, I feel like I've been hearing a lot more about handwriting.
Yeah, we need to bring it back.
Yeah.
It's another thing that kind of slipped through the cracks.
Yeah, as we had technology, it kind of, it's like...
Yeah, but we now know that teaching handwriting helps kids learn to read.
Yeah, that's amazing.
And with kids who are dyslexic, many kids who are dyslexic will do better with cursive than with manuscript. A lot of times I think it's very important that we embrace repetition, because the brain loves repetition for almost every skill. And that's why, in that sequence for spelling, you have to, 5 days a week, 20 minutes a day, a repetition of different kinds of work with those words. And certainly never give up on children with dyslexia. So I do have, and we might want to share this with our audience, a Psychology Today post on 7 ways to accommodate children with dyslexia in the classroom. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to run through them just quickly for you. The first one, allow children who may have dyslexia to demonstrate their competence. They may need more time on that test, or another way of showing how they have mastered the knowledge that is been part of their instruction. Here's a good one. It's just something every teacher can do. Change your seating arrangement to address students' difficulty with organizing or managing time or following teachers' directions or filtering out background noise. These are things that often co-occur. And it's just so easy, just that kid who is having difficulty following the teacher's directions or filtering out background noise because they're sitting in the back, just move them right up there so they are closer. Simple thing that can really be effective. Use a research-based spelling curriculum as a dyslexia-specific intervention. If you're doing a spelling book, if you're using a spelling book, you are going to early on, beginning in first grade, be able to recognize kids who are on track with, that lesson, that work with spelling, or kids who are having difficulty.
Yeah.
And one of the things about spelling as a dyslexic specific intervention, I often like to ask teachers, how many words should kids be able to recognize automatically at the end of first grade? And I won't ask you to say out loud what you're thinking. But when I go across the country and ask this question, often I get like, how many words should kids be able to, how many brain words at the end of first grade? People will often come up with like 100.
Yeah.
The answer, according to science, is 300 plus. Kids who, by the end of first grade, if they've been on a spelling book in first grade, they're 30 weeks and 10 words learned each lesson, or 10 new words or more. That's going to be 300 plus words. And they're brain words, words they can spell automatically. And if you can spell a word, you can read it.
Mm-hmm.
And
I think it's important to say, like, they're brain words, not sight words, which means that we have taught all the sounds in the words. We're not teaching them to memorize the whole word and then read the whole word. We're teaching the breakdown of the sounds and letters in the word.
And patterns.
Yes. Thank you.
And syllable types. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I think it's important to, again, teach handwriting, including manuscript for beginners and cursive beginning in second grade. Very important to expect to give kids with dyslexia more help with proofreading in school. If you're a fourth grade teacher, you expect kids to proofread. But if you have kids who are dyslexic, you become their editor. And I used to, when I talk with kids, I'd say, you're just like Einstein. Einstein was brilliant, but he is said to have had dyslexia. And so this year, I'm going to be your editor. I'm not going to be every fourth grader's editor, but I'm going to be your editor. And it teaches them the habit of coming and getting help before they send something out. And that can be very important for kids, a habit for kids, by the time they get in college, in high school, and there's, if they're applying for a job or a college, it's so important that those applications be proofread and correct spelling, because the first thing that college admissions folks do is throw out any application that comes in with misspelled words.
Yeah, but it does really lift up their strengths and then supports where they need support. I think that is such a great approach. And I think it teaches students in general, you could outreach this to your whole class. What do you feel like you do well? Where do you feel like you might need a little more help? And how can I support you in that place where you need more help? And I love that. I think that really does solidify the connection of the teacher as someone who's supporting a student with dyslexia in where their strengths are and where their areas of support are needed.
Absolutely. Yeah. You just articulate that eloquently.
Can I ask you a quick question about something you said before, though?
Sure.
I don't think so when we were talking about the spelling list and we said, they need to know like patterns, and you had added syllable types. I don't think I know all the syllable types, but I feel like I'm a pretty excellent speller.
Yeah.
What's going on?
Whether you may not know the names of them, but you recognize those patterns.
Got it. Okay, so I recognize the patterns, but I can't necessarily name them, and that's fine.
Right.
Okay.
Right. Yeah. But
that's a true statement. I would agree with that 100%, because sometimes I can't articulate to my daughter why things are, but I'll say like, this is a pattern you might see. And to me, that's enough to say that. And she gets that, but I don't need to name like, this is like an arc controlled vowel.
Yeah.
Right. Or whatever it might be.
Yeah. Yeah. Open, close
syllables. Yeah. I'm just saying the things
the
that
E-marker
I know.
syllable. Yeah.
Thank you. I know that was a sidebar, but I was like so curious. And while I have an expert here, I'm just going to ask you,
Well, you definitely know them. You may not know, that it's a consonant LE, but it's, you recognize those patterns and use them all the time.
That's cool to know. I think that's cool for listeners to know. Thank you.
Finally, I think it's so important to remember to make accommodations for kids. Be an advocate for all students who struggle with dyslexia. And again, Lori and Melissa, you've kind of expressed that throughout our session today. We need to have compassion for students who are struggling. We need to make sure that we're not mistaking dyslexia as a sign of inferior intelligence or laziness. That one struck home to me. And I recognize that students with dyslexia also often have strengths. Some experts even suggest that dyslexics are often gifted and have special talents, such as thinking outside the box, being creative, entrepreneurial, artistic, and athletic. So all of those things can co-occur with dyslexia.
Many things can be true.
Yes. And it looks different for every person. I think that's
it's complex.
Really taking that away today.
Yeah.
I'm stuck on that continuum idea. I'm so grateful that you shared that up front, because that's what I keep thinking of. That continuum of how.
Yeah, mild, moderate, severe.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I think so often we want to say look for these 5 things, and if they have all 5 of them, then they are dyslexic, or if they don't, they are not. And
absolutely,
it's harder to live in that gray area, but it's we have to. Yeah.
Well, you made this so much fun. I hope you've enjoyed it.
Absolutely.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Thank you so much.
We've learned so much.
Yeah.
Thank you for being here.
Richard, since the last time you've been on, we started a new ending. Do you have a couple minutes to answer some quick questions with us? They're just fun ones.
Sure.
Right, these are really fun, quick response questions.
Yeah. Quick response, whatever comes to your mind, no pressure.
Okay.
So first question is, what do you love to read?
I love to read history. I'm a big history buff. I live in a historic home in Mobile, Alabama. And I have some outside reading. One of the problems with me is that I have to be very selective about what I choose to read, because I have such a slow reading rate, and there's so much academic reading that I have to do. So I'm very selective. When I always buy my books. I don't check up books out at the library because I have to keep them and, come back, 10 years later and reread them. But
I'm hearing so many strategies. You're prioritizing, right?
A recent novel that's now a movie, Where the Crawdads Sing.
Oh, yeah. That's a good one.
It's set in the marshland of northeastern North Carolina, coast of North Carolina, but it's so much like the Delta, Tensas Gulf Delta here in Mobile Bay. So I also enjoy reading like that. It kind of connects with nature and my love for nature. And
well, I have the next question for you. And I was wondering, what do you love to watch?
Well, I love to watch historical fiction.
I had a feeling it would be connected, and I was trying not to say it beforehand.
I'm very interested in nature and birds, and I have coffee every day in my back garden and watch the hummingbirds come. So love watching things like that. couple of those series on TV. I don't know if I should share that or not. I'm watching Yellowstone right now. It's
I've heard good things about that.
It's terribly violent.
I know. I think I got a couple episodes in, and then I saw them kill an animal of sorts, and I was like, "Oh, I don't know if I can keep going."
Yeah, they're gonna kill something and murder something every episode. So I'm still trying to decide if I'm going to stick that one out.
Can I tell you that I went to Yellowstone this summer, and we did a little horseback riding excursion, and the guy who led the ride was telling us that people come and do these rides and come to Yellowstone and think that the show is actually real and happening now. And they'll,
oh my goodness.
And they'll be asking things. We were cracking up. I'm like, oh my gosh, no way.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. I've been to Yellowstone. It's been, 60 years ago when I was a Boy Scout, but what a beautiful experience you must have had.
Yeah, it was gorgeous. And also that was like by far the funniest part.
How fun.
All right, let's see if the next one's connected too. What do you love to listen to?
Well, I love to listen to jazz, and classical, and country music, but don't ask me the names of the artists or the names of the songs because I'm dyslexic and I wouldn't be able to retrieve those for you. But I have very kind of eclectic, all kinds of music I like.
All right, final question. Why do you do what you love for education or for literacy?
Might have already answered that one. I just have this passion for, my calling on earth is to teach children to read. And I'm passionate about it. And, I continue to just get great joy if I can, my life anyway can have the impact on children that comes through teaching children to read, which is incredible. I would have lived a good life.
Wow. Thank you so much. We loved talking to you again.
Mm-hmm. You have an open invite anytime.
Anytime.
This is so nice. If you just want to have coffee on like a Tuesday, you let us know that too.
Oh, wonderful. Well, thank you. The two of you and your audience are having such incredible impact, and just keep up the good work. And I'm so proud to be associated with teachers. Teachers are just some of the most important people on earth, and
sure.
I think you've got a great group that you're growing and having incredible impact on. So keep up the good work.
Well, thank you. You too. We'll keep sharing in that incredible group. We'll keep sharing all your blog posts and your books and everything, all the good work that you've done. So thank you.
Oh, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thanks for listening, literacy lovers. We release a new podcast episode every Friday and share more resources in a newsletter on Tuesday. Sign up for our newsletter at literacypodcast.com. Each week, you'll receive important information, resources, and connected content.
We're excited to create a space for community discussion about our podcast. We want to connect with our listeners and support you in answering your questions. But we also realize there are a lot of other educators out there who have great advice and experience too. Let's keep learning together in our Melissa and Lori Love Literacy Podcast Facebook group, and be sure to follow us on Instagram and Twitter.
If the content in this episode helped you, share with a fellow educator and teacher friend. Our literacy lover community welcomes educators at every stage of their learning journey. We're so glad you're here to learn with us.
The views and opinions expressed by the hosts and guests of the Melissa and Lori Love Literacy Podcast in this episode are not necessarily the opinions of Gray Minds PBC or its employees.